Hi there. How you doing? Are you scrolling on YouTube? Let me just remind you to stop doing that because it's rotting your brain, and let's just hang out together instead. Just chill. This is an unscripted, unedited, single take rant about music. Let's talk about music together, kind of like a lesson. Let's relax and chill, drink some water, just have a great time. I think it needs to be louder, so I'm gonna go turn it up while I start talking. So we're gonna talk about like music theory from zero to hero. Not that I'm a hero, but sometimes you know more what you don't know than what you know. And there's a lot of things I know I don't know. So we can at least talk about those. But let's start from the very beginning. So if you don't know anything about music theory at all, there is so much you can learn just by understanding how stuff works, and that'll already make you a better musician. And if you don't consider yourself to be a musician yet, you learn some of these things and you're a musician just like that, without even touching an instrument. Isn't that great? So if you look at a piano, and I'm sorry that you can't see what I see right now, but if you've ever seen a piano, you know what I'm looking at. There's a bunch of white keys, there's some black keys. On some really cool pianos, they flip-flop it so that the white ones are on top and the black ones are on the bottom. But in either case, there's like there's like two rows, there's like two layers. There's one bottom one and then one higher one. And you look at that and you're like, what the heck? If I play something, it just sounds bad no matter what I do. Well, that was actually kind of good. But like, how do you make sense of this chaos? So here's how you start. All of the white keys, all the ones on the bottom, the ones that are at the low level that are flat, they're all in the key of C major or A minor. But let's not get into that yet. Same thing like if you play a recorder, if you just follow the holes, it'll just go boom, 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 boom. A lot of instruments are in C. Piano is, I would say it's in C, even though you can play music in any key on it. I would say it's in C. It's kind of like it's built for C. It's in C. Can't even play my scales. Anyway, so all of the white notes are in C. But you have to start on C for it to sound like that, because if I start on a different key, it won't sound like that. Kind of got weird at the end there, because I didn't start on C. It sounded pretty good for the most part. Let's see if I start on one of these other ones, it'll sound even worse. That's kind of weird. I didn't start on C, so then it just like was all weird and out of whack. If I just pick a note at random and then go up from there, that doesn't sound like music, does it? No, it doesn't sound like you know what you're doing. No! If you want to sound like you know what you're doing, you gotta start on C if you're gonna play all the white notes. That sounds like something, doesn't it? So how you know you're on C is, well, you just listen for the one that sounds right. It's probably helpful if you want to play the piano to learn like what things equal what notes. So if I say C, then you'll be like, oh, okay, there's a C, there's a C, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one. How many is that total? 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 C's. There's not 8 of everything, I think. Like there's not 8 E's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's only 7 E's on the piano. If you learn where C is, then you can figure out where all the other ones are. They call it middle C because it's kind of in the middle of the piano, but it's not like exactly in the middle of the piano. There's 88 keys, and there's 12 notes total, which is kind of confusing, right? I'm just going to keep going. Like, there's all of these keys, and they're all technically different notes. They have different values, they make different sounds, but there's 12 notes. So I could play, there's 8 C's, right? So like, that's a C, and that's a C. And what's the difference between those two Cs? Well, one of them is like double the frequency of the lower one. The higher one has the waves in the air are going at twice the speed. So it sounds similar, but it's like an octave higher. That's what they call that. So there's 8 octaves of C. And so within the piano, there's like 12 different notes that are just like repeated up and down octaves. So total, there's really just 12 notes. And that's kind of just in like Western European music, where like 500 years ago, probably less than that, I don't actually know, maybe in the, I don't know, the 1500s, I made that up. They like just decided, I don't know which committee, what chair did this, but someone was like, all right, we need to make a certain amount of notes so that it's always the same and everybody can play together. So they decided on 12, and it was a pretty good reason for doing that, but we can talk about that later. They decided on splitting the octave, because that's like ba 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 bum. Everybody can agree what that sounds like, but the notes in between the octave, all the other things, there were a lot of options. They decided to split it equally into 12 notes. So that's why we have 12 different notes within the octave. That's the octave, so you kind of count that as the same note. But in between those two, you have this chromatic scale, is what they call it, where you go up in steps. And it could have been any arbitrary number. There's no reason why it had to be 12, but they chose 12. And that's like the system of music that we live in today, which is kind of crazy to imagine. Like, what if they pick 13? What if they pick 6? What if they pick 21? People play music with 6-tone temperament is what it's called, 21-tone temperament, 52-tone temperament, which is one octave split into that many pieces. And you get really cool, different sounding stuff. And there's a lot of music in the world that, like outside of the European influence, that didn't split up their music system into 12 notes, that still exists today and just has always existed. And you know, we call it microtonal, which is like in between notes, but really there's no rule saying that there had to be a certain amount of notes in between the octave. But that's just the world we live in, where it's 12. So if you think of it that way, that actually makes things a lot easier. Oh, there's only 12 notes total. I mean, it looks like there's so many, but there's only 12, and it's just the same thing, copy pasted over and over again, and they're just kind of like in different registers, but they're the same note. If you play a bunch of notes of the same note at the same time, it just kind of just feels like a bigger, louder version, a deeper version of that note. I could just place my C and then play like 3 more C's. And it just sounds like C, more C, but it's not really adding anything. Like it's adding volume, it's adding like this depth to that same note. It's like one voice. That's like a whole chorus of people singing the same note, right? That's like the sound of a whole orchestra tuning at the beginning, except it's in A actually, but it's the same thing. Like, you know, at the beginning. And then they start playing, you know, like, yeah. Iconic sound. That's what that is. It's just a bunch of A's, all in different octaves, and all different instruments, different timbres and volumes, and slight variances in pitch, but it gives it that huge sound even on one note. But so here's where we're gonna start getting into some music theory. We can get a lot more interesting in the sounds that we make by adding different notes. And it doesn't really matter what notes we're playing. What matters is the relationship between the notes. So it's like math. If we have our C, go back to C. So this is only C, but it's a bunch of C. We don't really like start to feel anything until we add some other colors. Whoa, that's a whole different thing now. And that's just 2 notes. I'll simplify it to just 2 fingers. That's 2 notes played at the same time. And that seems to have more going on, like more flavor, more tonal color, you know? Instead of just like one big painting that's just made of all red. And you can make beautiful paintings with all red, though I would argue that you cannot make beautiful music with just 1 note. When you add another color, you have some red and you have some yellow, you can do a little bit more with that. Now, I don't think there's many songs that only have 2 notes in them. Most music would probably have at least 5 or 6 notes. So we can just keep adding more. So I'm just gonna stack more on this. So I'm playing an E, skipping 1, and then playing, or a C, skipping 1 and playing an E at the same time. I'm just going on, only playing white keys. There's a C, skip 1. There's an E, skip 1, play a G. This sounds kind of familiar, like if you hear like a barbershop quartet thing or something, and someone goes, ah, and then they keep that going, and then the next person goes, ah, and then the next person goes, ah, and the next person goes, ah, and that's just another C on top of the octave. But so there's 3 different notes, and then 2 of them are repeated. And we have like a full chord. That's kind of like a classic sounding, that sounds like music. That's a chord. You hear that in a song. You hear someone playing that. That's like the beginning of Let It Be. And we're on a different chord there, but so many songs start with that chord, C. That is C, and since the note is C, that's just 1 note, right? There's only 1 C. Well, there's a bunch of C's, but C is C. When you add these other 2, we call it C major. And that's because it has, of the relationships that it has with those other 2 notes. There's a 5th, which is, if you count C as 1, then C is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have a 1 and a 5 in that scale, which seems familiar to most people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Most people can sing that, whether they're a musician or not, play any instruments or not. That's just kind of like built into our brains, which is cool, just from all the music that we hear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You play both at the same time, 1 and 5. You get this strong 5th interval. There's like psychological reasons why intervals sound the way that they do. And I don't think we really know all the answers. Like, a 5th is the most simple other than the octave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the most simple relationship between 2 notes. And then the second most simple one is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 and the 5th. Ba-bum. And the reason has to do with physics, like how the waves work. So the octave is double the high octave. 8 is double the wavelength of 1. So they match nicely in the air. Like 1 is double and then 1 is like this. So they like sync up really nicely, and our brain seems to like that. And not only our brains, but even animals' brains too, certain ones, which is cool. It's just an interesting fact of physics and humans and the way our brains work that makes music beautiful. Isn't that awesome? So that's the most simple relationship, is the 1 and the 8. That's called an octave. That's the name of that relationship. It's called an octave. And then the 1 and the 5th is the second most. And the reason why is because the 5th is, I don't even know what the mathematical thing, I think it's like 2/3 or something. I gotta go look it up. But it's like a really simple fraction more than the 1. So if the 1, if the 1 is 1, we'll give it like the number 1. And the octave, which is double, 2, we'll give it 2, even though it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's twice the wavelength. The fifth is like 1 1/2. That actually sounds right. Maybe it's 1 1/2 or 1 2/3. I don't know. But whatever it is, it's a really simple ratio. While like something else, even within the octave, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you play that and the 1, that's a more interesting interval. There's like some clashy sound going on there. That's because the 7 is almost the octave, but not exactly. So it actually is like creating this dissonance with our 1. Our 7 is creating dissonance with the 1. Just like how a 2 might create dissonance with the 1. So 1, 2, if you play them at the same time, 1, 2. Creates an interesting sound. It almost sounds like a mistake if you're playing a song. You want to fix that mistake. That sounds better, right? It sounds like a mistake. It's just 2 waves that are slightly off from each other, so they kind of like cancel each other out and add together in more complicated rhythms and patterns in our brains when we add those 2 waves together. So there's like a whole science behind how just simple tones stack together to make something that we perceive as beautiful or interesting or different than other things. We can hear one chord and hear, even though we don't know exactly what it is or why it sounds different, we can hear that it sounds different than another chord. Like, we instantly know what that means. And when we hear something like that, we can even hear that, oh, that needs to be resolved. It feels like it's leading somewhere. If I start here and I go, like, oh, I need to play the ending chord. And what does the ending chord sound like? Back to our C. So everything is in context, and everything is like has a relationship with everything else that's going on, which is like so cool. And which is why like music just builds like math. I don't know, I'm sure some of you aren't fans of math in school because of the way it's taught, and maybe it's just not that interesting to you, but I'm just talking about the concept of like building blocks. The way that you learn math usually is you start with like a basic, core foundation of arithmetic, and then you learn some fractions and dividing, and then you stack more and more complicated ideas on top of that. Music is just the same. But even at like a physical, like physics level, it's the same on how like different frequencies moving through the air are vibrating in your ears and activating your brain. And the way that those frequencies stack up make complicated, wonderful things inside your mind, just like how the elements of music theory build up and you can make more complicated and say more nuanced things through your music and your performance of music that other people will get and understand even though they don't know anything about music, which I think is super cool. So we have our white notes. We have a bunch of white notes on the piano. If we know where C is, we can sing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We know that 1, 3, 5, that makes a C major chord. And that has a specific sound, and that's cool. Now, if we move this shape, 1, 3, 5, we're pressing the C, we leave a space, we press another note, which is the E, we leave a space, then we press the G. That's a shape. We can move that shape around and it'll make different chords that also sound good. This is C major. I just moved it up, now it's a D minor. Moved it up one more time, now it's an E minor. Now it's an F, now it's a G, and back to C. Well, that was a wrong note but yeah, that's so if you get that shape, right? That's a whole song already. You're just moving that same shape around, and it's just that relationship of 1, 3, and 5. How cool is that? All right. Let's go deeper. One level deeper. So that's a chord. Now, on any instrument, you're gonna play things in scales and chords, and you're gonna play all this music that has like notes which have relationships to one another, and those relationships are the most important thing. That's like what music is, right? So there's all these different types of chords that you can use to craft sounds if you want to be a musician, if you want to write music, even if you want to listen to music. Knowing these things might give you a deeper appreciation of what you're hearing, and you might be able to hear more in the music that you already love by kind of like learning some of these principles, which is really cool. Okay, so that was a C major, right? That's just a chord, C major. Now you might have heard this before, but there's a major chord and there's a minor chord. And usually when people explain the difference, one sounds happy and one sounds sad. Can you guess which one is which? Versus, that's something different. And I only changed one note, and I only changed it by a little bit. I moved it over just a little bit, and it kind of changed the sound a lot. Okay, now maybe it will make more sense in context. So here's one, right? That's our C major, and then here's our C minor. That's C minor. A little more somber, a little more deep, introspective, thoughtful, slow. Interesting, right? How that evokes like a certain response versus, something else. And you're just changing one note. Versus. I used to know how to play that song. Anyway. That's a major and a minor chord. I'm not going to tell you exactly what the differences are, what I'm playing different, but I just want you to listen. That's a major chord, that's a minor chord. And usually, in every piece of music, you have both of those. There are ways to play only major chords in music, but I would say that that's more rare. Maybe really simple things that only have like 3 chords in them, like old blues songs or like old rock songs, like that's C major, then F major, then G major, F major, C major, G, back to C. Cool, right? But a lot of pop songs, a lot of modern music, there's like a combination of both. And there's like a nice, there's just fun in like bouncing back between major and minor, and there's just an infinite number of ways you can combine those 2 chords, types of chords. Because you have a C major, right? You have all the 12 notes, and you can combine all the 12 notes with these 2 types of chords now that we have. We have majors and minors. So we have C major, we can have a C minor, we can have an F major, we can have an F minor. So now that's 24 types of chords total. But there's other types of chords, and it gets more interesting the more you learn. And a lot of people, when you learn like guitar or piano, but especially like guitar or ukulele, you kind of just learn like the basic shapes, which is just all the majors and minors. And even on ukulele, you don't learn them all, because ukulele is kind of just made to be good for certain chords and not really others. Some of them are like insanely weird, where you're like, who invented this? Like, why? Nobody's gonna play in this key on an ukulele. Nobody's gonna play in F sharp on a ukulele because it just doesn't, your fingers have to go like this. It just doesn't make any sense. All of the chords are just gonna be like this if you play in this key. So let's just play in C on the ukulele. Anyway, it gets more interesting when you learn all these different types of chords. So there's a major, there's a minor, there's this one, which maybe is a subtle difference, but it's just the same. It's the same difference between major and minor. I just moved the note another step. So this is major, this is minor, here's major again, and then here's a suspended fourth. Okay, cool. It's just a different note, but in context, this used to be my favorite chord for a really long time, like all as a kid, in middle school and high school, and maybe a little bit past that. This is my favorite chord. It's a suspended fourth, and I thought that it gave the feeling of flying. It's just those notes. If I do the same thing in a major, it doesn't sound exactly the same. It sounds kind of basic. La 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 la. I mean, to me, that's what I get. And in a minor chord, it's like, okay, it's like the beginning of some sad ballad. But when I play this note, suddenly we're flying. That's just the feeling I get. Maybe it doesn't. How does it make you feel when you hear this compared to those other ones? What happened there at the end? That was cool. I'm playing this chord and I resolved the chord, which means that like it had a tension in it, that chord, like an unresolved tension. You know, I have some unresolved tension in my life, and we seek to resolve that tension, right? We want to say sorry to our old partners from the past. We want to reconnect with long-lost members of our family. We want to resolve tension. So that's just a natural human thing. So some chords have tension built into them without any other context. Usually, you know, you can create tension with just like our major chords, like we did before, C major, but it's in context. So C major, no tension. F, a little bit of tension. I can go back to the C major from here. Resolves the tension. I can make more tension than that if I start in the C, then I go up to F major, then I go up to G major. Feels like, oh my gosh, it needs to land somewhere. I can't just hold it forever. Thank you. Oh, the hug, the romantic kiss at the end of the rom-com. Thanos is defeated. Everything is well, catharsis in the universe. We resolved the tension. So music, to me, has a lot of that in it, which is why it's so interesting. And there's so many interesting ways to get tension, and one of them is in the chords that you choose. So that suspended fourth, what a weird name. Why is it called that? We have a major chord, we have a minor chord. Major sounds happy, so major, I guess it's majorly happy. Minor, it's smaller, it's under, it's sadder, it's minor, it's younger, it's in a cave digging for rocks, it's a minor. And then we have this suspended fourth, which means that it's not major or minor. So I'm going to tell you the ratios, right? We have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 3, 5. That's our major chord. And if I take the 3 and I make it sad, I bring it down one note, and it goes up into the black keys actually, but it's just one note to the left of where it was. So it goes just a little bit lower. That's a major. Then I take that 3 and I make it a little bit.
You don't have any home pods.
Okay, thanks Siri. A little bit lower. Now that's the minor. And so the 1 and the 5 are still there. That's like the rock, the solid foundation that the rest of the chord is built on. But that 1 in the middle, major, minor, major, minor, major. If instead of going down, I go 1 up and I go a little bit higher, then it becomes suspended 4th. Ooh, and I love that sound. And the reason why, so it's suspended, I guess it's because supposedly like there's no 3 in it. So there's no 3, and there's no flat 3, which is what I did to it to make it minor. I flattened the 3. I just put it down by 1 note, and it went, and not all the way down to 2. There's actually a note in between the 3 and the 2. It's the black key. So I put it down, I flattened it down to the black key, and that made it minor. But if I take out the 3, and I just a 1 and a 5, 1, 5, instead of the 3, I suspend it upwards into the 4, because 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm actually just playing a 1, a 4, and a 5 all at the same time. And I get our suspended 4th. And that has some tension. Kind of like before. And it wants to resolve, and where does it want to resolve? It wants to resolve down back to the 3, because that's like a really solid state for the chord to be in. It's a low energy state. It's like a resting place. That's back down to the 3. So we have 3 chords now. We have a major chord, we have a minor chord, and we have a suspended 4th. Sometimes people call it a sus 4. Not a suspicious 4, but a suspended 4. And that's just by changing that middle note, a little bit down or a little bit up. And we get 3 very different sounding chords. And I want to resolve that suspended 4th. Wow, so cool. But there's more. So these are just 3 note chords. So there's a major, a minor, we have a suspended. We also have a suspended 2. What does that mean? It's a 3. Instead of going up to the 4 or down to the flat 3, we go all the way down to 2. So we have a 1, 2, and a 5. 1, 2, 5. We're playing all those at the same time. And that's a nice sound. It doesn't, there's a little bit of tension in there, but it doesn't sound like it needs to resolve, right? It kind of sounds like that's a nice ending. Like, okay. Like you can end a song like that. There's something really nice about that chord, actually. It's just like this, I would call it like a feeling of home. I don't know why, like it feels, there's like this like not a nostalgicness to it, but like this warmth to it, like something extra, like this there's a tension and warmth. So there's like it's almost like a bittersweetness. Especially after a long journey of playing all different kinds of things, and then you land. Right, because you could just go super basic, right? This is just a major chord. It's very simple, like very, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it sounds simple, doesn't it? Kind of like a low energy, like the easiest possible chord. Not to play, but just like the easiest possible chord for our brains to hear. When you have that, there's a little bit more complexity. It has the same at-home feeling, and there's no tension like it needs to resolve somewhere. Like, unlike, you know, the suspended 4th, that kind of feels like, oh, there's a little bit too much tension. You wouldn't really end a song like that. Like, you would end a song like that? You wouldn't end a song like that. You would have to resolve that, right? But that 2, suspended 2, this is the normal major. This is suspended 2. Oh, wow, sophisticated. Love that. So now we have 4 chords, right? Major chord, minor chord, suspended 4th, suspended 2, times 12, because there's 12 different notes, even though it looks like there's a lot, gives us 48 potential chords with just what we already know now. And those are just 3-note chords. You can have an infinite number of notes stacked on each other for like infinite complexity. There's kind of a limit to how much we can hear at the same time and make it actually sounding good. Like, there's a lot of information for our brains, and sometimes when you play too many notes, it just like, people just get overwhelmed. It's like, that's just too much. So 3-note chords are great chords. 4-note chords, 5-note chords, 6-note chords, you kind of run into a limit around there. But these are all 3-note chords. And we're gonna do 2 more, just because I just want to show you like what exists, because nobody talks about it. People don't learn this stuff. Like, you pick up an ukulele, you pick up a guitar, and nobody talks about the other stuff, which is like, come on. It's not even that more, it's not more complicated at all. It's the same difference as major and minor, and everybody learns that, but now we have a couple more things in our toolbox, and it's totally opening up like the scope of what we're able to achieve. So even with just 3 notes, there's still more. So we have a diminished chord, right? So we have our 1, 3, 5. If we flatten the 3, which makes it a minor, but we also flatten the 5, which we haven't done yet. We haven't messed with the 5 yet. We're still in our C. 1, flat 3, flat 5. Now that's a crunchy sound for sure. That's something else. That's a lot of tension. We were here. That's just our C major. And that's also a nice resolution to what we were just playing. Ooh, that's funky. Why would we need a chord like this? Well, it has a lot of tension, and that's kind of the reason why. That chord is like unsettling, right? You would not end a song there. You don't go on a whole journey and you finally get to the end of the movie and you just play that. Ooh, that's like the worst ending. That's like the main character dies and is murdered by their dog and who eats their face and their bones and the... Okay, anyway. That chord is as crazy as that movie description I just gave. And it needs to resolve. So we resolve it. And there's a lot of different ways to resolve a chord like that, which is another reason why it's really useful. Like a lot of ways. I'm trying to think of all the ways. That was not one of the ways. That was not one of the ways. That's one. Anyway, that chord appears in like a lot of blues music, actually. I don't know if you can hear that. Doesn't sound that bad anymore in context, but that's the same chord. By itself, it's like, oh my gosh, what is happening? It sounds like a train. That's the feeling that I get. That's just what's associated with it. It sounds like a train to me, like a train, like honking its whistle. Is this how you do a train? I don't know. This is how you do a train, like this. This is what they're doing. They have a piano in the conductor's seat and he's playing it like that. Honk, honk, the train is coming, platform 9 3/4. But then when you put it in context, and it's like, oh, okay, that's actually not so bad. Same thing. Same chord. Different key. called a diminished chord. And that kind of makes sense when you think about it. We have major, minor, suspended fourth, suspended second, and then we have diminished, which is like minor of the 3 and minor of the 5. Diminished. Okay. This is the last one. This is kind of like the last one that's really worth talking about. There's like another, literally an infinite number of 3-note combinations that you can make. But last one I think is worth talking about is called an augmented chord. So you get your major chord, 1, 3, 5, and you take the 5 and you augment it and you raise it up a half step. And a half step is just whatever the next note is on the piano, including the black keys. So if there's no black key and the next one is white, then you just go up that one. And if there is a black key up towards the higher end of the piano right next to it, then going up that way diagonally is augmenting that note. So 1, 3, 5. I'm going to augment the 5. 1, 3, sharp 5. Oh my gosh, why? I thought it was going to be a nice chord. We already did the janky chord, and now we have another one? Why are we doing this? Yeah, it's weird. We're kind of getting to the outer edges of what's nice in our 3-note chords, right? This chord, I want you to think about it first, what that chord feels like to you. I'm going to play the other ones leading up to it, and then you decide what that sounds like to you. Okay, this is major. This is minor. Suspended 4. This is suspended 2. Diminished. It's like evil, right? It's dastardly. Okay, this is our augmented. How does that make you feel? To me, it's not evil. There is some tension in there for sure. There's something weird about it for sure. Can't really put our finger on it, can we? I mean, I can. I literally am. But that last note really kind of stands out. Like, there's something wrong with that. It's not what we expect. To me, it sounds kind of crazy, kind of like insane, kind of like wired, like you drank too much coffee and it's like 4 in the morning and you have work the next day. You're like, it sounds like anxiety. It sounds like there's also like this airiness to it, like this floating, ethereal void to it at the same time. And that's because it's connected to a scale called the whole tone scale, which sounds like this. And that kind of sounds like a dream, doesn't it? And that chord is part of that scale. So we have all these flavors. That's 6, right? Major, minor, sus4, sus2, diminished, augmented. And what cool words. Aren't those great names? 6 times 12, which is an amount that's more than 60. 72, 84. Is it 84? That feels wrong, but it might be 84. Chords. 3-note chords. Isn't that crazy? Next time I'll talk about 4-note chords. And just like the 3-note chords, there's kind of like normal ones at the beginning and then like more crazy ones as you go out towards the edges of what is commonly used. That's in the center. toward the edges of our musical existence. I mean, there's, infinite number of note combinations. You can make a 10-note chord if you really wanted to. You can make a 88-note chord on the piano. I don't think I can do it, but it probably sounds like this. Look at all that we learned about music theory, just like that. Isn't that great? I'm trying to think of how to wrap this thing up. We talked about the white keys on the piano. We talked about physics of waves, how the sound travels through the air into our ears and into our brains, which is really where the music is happening. It's in our brains. This is just sound, just waves bouncing around in the air. It doesn't mean anything. It's just noise. But our brains interpret it as something beautiful. And there's something really cool, I think, about that. The physics of music and how the notes combined in certain intervals or relationships physically to give us certain impressions, certain feelings, octaves, different intervals, relationships, right? That's a fifth. That's a third. 1, 2, 3. We have our scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And when we combine different notes in that scale, we get these different chords. 1, 3, 5, and that gives us a certain feeling and a certain sound. And we can combine even just that one chord with other chords of different note names. So that's C major. We can combine it with an F major. We can combine it with a G major. And we're already writing music. But then 1, 3, 5, if we flatten that 3, 1, 3, 5, we get a minor chord, and now we have a whole other darker palette to play with, and we can combine the both. You don't have to play one song in all minor, one song in all major. You use them both all the time. You can have an E minor, and an E flat major, and a B flat major, and an F major, and then back to a C minor, and they all work together beautifully. We learned about some of the other fancier chords that people don't talk about as much, and then you don't see when you look up chords for songs, because people don't write them out. Even though they're in lots of songs, people just write major and minor, because you can kind of get away with it, because major and minor, you can kind of cover 90% of all popular music with major and minor, even though there's more going on. Jazz, classical, other fringe, more experimental types of music outside of pop have more recognizably non-simple chords. But even pop music and a lot of really, overplayed songs you hear on the radio has more going on than just major and minor a lot of times. And you have stuff like sus4, which is a 1, 4, 5, which I think gives the feeling of flying. Wants to resolve. There's a tension in it inherently, and it wants to resolve from the 4 down to the 3. You have our sus2, which is a 1, 2, and a 5. 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5. And it sounds like home. It sounds like the end of a song or the beginning of a song, but with a little more complexity, a little more sophistication, something else going on. That can also sound like flying. If you get really creative, you can resolve this to another chord. A lot of options. We learned about the diminished chord, which is a flat 3 and a flat 5. 1, flat 3, flat 5. And we're starting to sound evil. We're starting to sound dastardly. It sounds like a train. Oh no, the train is coming. Choo-choo. But also in blues music, wants to resolve. That one has a lot of tension in it. And then our augmented chord, which does have tension in it, a bit of mystery or mysteriousness. And that one wants to resolve. That can resolve there. It can resolve down. It can resolve in a lot of ways too. That was not one of the ways, but hey, There's no rules in music. Do what sounds good to you. And that was our 3-note chords. So we talked about so much, and I don't know about you, but I learned a lot today about what music is, what the point of it all is. Nobody really knows. I don't know. It was nice hanging out. Thanks for sitting around with me. I hope you had a good time. I did. Don't scroll YouTube too much. Maybe take a breath, drink some water, hang out. Call your mom. She misses you.